Great, so it's live and recording. We can chop out this first 2 minutes.
I will behave.
We've got people are starting to come in now, so we're...
Is this the first you've done webinars?
No, we've done quite a few.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay.
The first one that I've managed.
Yeah, it's different when you I guess you're behind the lens or in front of the lens.
Yeah.
Or that works.
So we've got people joining, lots of people coming early, which is great. We will wait until 5 to start to kick off, but welcome everyone who's joined so far.
So Rob, you're 9 in the morning, right?
No, I'm in Massachusetts, so it's about 12, almost 12 noon. Yeah. So I haven't been in LA since March 31st. It's been a while.
Wow.
So we are now live. Everyone is in. We will give another minute to let everyone get in. But welcome to the webinar. It is now recording and live, so do not swear. This recording will be going out. I always find this funny bit at the start. Everyone's sitting patiently.
In anticipation.
Yes, of all the amazing things that we're going to talk about.
Yeah, everyone more or less is at home. So
I know. I love a webinar. Great, so I can see the numbers increasing. I think I'll just get going with the intros now so that we can get cracking into the real nitty gritty. So I'm Flora Davidson, co-founder of SupplyCompass. And this is one in our series of webinars that we've been hosting throughout lockdown. Just for those who don't know who SupplyCompass is or what we do, we are a production platform and we work with brands and manufacturers kind of across the design to delivery process. And at the core of our business is our platform, but we have a network of manufacturers and a team of experienced supply chain experts who support businesses along their product development journey. So our mission really is to enable sustainable circular design, sourcing and production and enable it to become easy, accessible and cost effective. And why we really do these webinars is, firstly, the fashion industry is massive and it's full of plenty of challenges and also as a result of that, plenty of opportunities for exciting change. And it really spans so many industries. It's spanning production, agriculture, material science, packaging, logistics, obviously beyond the actual fashion supply chains themselves. So really, I think what's so important is that we have these conversations cross industry and that we solve these problems together. It's for us at SupplyCompass, and I think for both Rob and Gert, it is a collaborative journey that no one of us can do alone. And so really these webinars are an opportunity, selfishly for me, to have interesting conversations with other people across the industry, but also to kind of talk and listen to movers and shakers and people who are doing exciting things and have our minds opened, perhaps our minds changed, because I really do feel if we the moment we stop listening and learning from each other, then we stop innovating and progressing. So that is just an intro to why we are sitting here today. This webinar will be recorded, it is being recorded, and we have a Q&A box at the bottom, which I will be checking kind of throughout. So please do ask questions. What I like to do, rather than just to wait for a Q&A at the end, if there's a question that's relevant to what we're talking about, I'll try and slip it in because I think it makes more sense. It feels more organic to talk about it as we're going along. So today we are very lucky to have two passionate innovators join us in the conversation. Gert Meyer, CCO of Arch & Hook, world's #1 sustainable hanger brand, and Rob Ainelli, founder and president of Oceanworks, the global marketplace for recycled plastics and sustainable materials. So the focus of today's webinar, we have some kind of key areas of discussion, but we also can go in a direction that the conversation may flow in. I like webinars when they're not too structured or scripted. So really today it's about hearing about the origins of Arch & Hook and Oceanworks as businesses, and you know, why did you both focus on these areas of within the industry, and understand also the opportunities and challenges within the ocean plastic space, and also kind of ask you about your thoughts on the digital aspect of the digitization of the industry. So let's get cracking. I suppose just to begin with, to you, Gert, and this is coming to both of you, how did Arch & Hook start? What kind of, why did you create it?
Why hangers, right? Yeah, it's interesting. So my background is in retail design, fixtures, furniture, and our CEO used to be a coworker of mine back in the day in Amsterdam. It's a while back, and we used to work in that industry, and we're very passionate about it. And it was actually him encountering questions from customers that he used to deal with. At this point, he was in the UK, I was in the States, I was already in New York. And they were like, we have these beautiful fixtures, but there's a complete disconnect with the hangers that we have. Where do these hangers come from? And he'd be like, I have no idea, right? So he started exploring, researching the industry, and found out that it's a big industry. There are a lot of hangers in this world, but it's also an industry in which the hangers are oftentimes really treated as a commodity, as an afterthought. Not seen as a part of a marketing mix or a store environment, when obviously hangers do live in stores, also in different places, but also stores. So, and he noticed that it's a very polluting item as well. So that sort of sparked the interest to come up with a company that would approach this whole matter in a different way. And that's how Arch & Hook came to life.
I love it. I love it when I see businesses where you kind of find something and you go questioning, why is that being done like that? How is this possible? And then you kind of see the bigger impact and the wider impact. So yeah, Rob, what about the origins of Oceanworks?
Sure. Yeah, so our origins really began in consumer products. My background after university was developing consumer products overseas. So I had a pretty big manufacturing background, and that led me into the eyewear industry. Where in 2016, I launched a brand called Norton Point, where we developed sunglasses made from recovered ocean plastics, in this case, high density polyethylene. You know, it was one of those times where we were curious if consumers were really keen on ocean plastics. So we brought it to Kickstarter to kind of pre-vet and kind of see what the reaction would be. And it was outstanding. We were fully funded in 6 days, went on to raise about double what we were seeking. But interestingly enough, we started being contacted by a lot of different companies, and mostly large Fortune 500 businesses, like Dell Computers, for instance. And they were kind of scratching their heads because they were really excited about launching their own ocean plastic initiatives, but they were really stumped. And this pattern kept sort of taking place over the coming months, where I started to see a lot of pattern recognition that large corporates wanted to have more sustainability in their business plans, but often they were really struggling to figure out how to navigate this sort of fragmented and in some ways chaotic supply chain. So that eventually became the genesis of Oceanworks. I had a background in B2B. I had a marketing company years prior, and I just kind of had this gut feeling that there was a really big gap in the market for connecting the dots between supply and demand. And the vision was to create a digital platform, a marketplace, where we could essentially put the buy now button next to recycled plastics, and in that case, ocean plastics. And that really kind of began our journey into sort of providing a service to offer supply chain services, but also really to de-risk these materials. And that's kind of really where we found our sweet spot. And that's kind of what we've built upon up until today.
Amazing. So I suppose my next question is really, why Why hangers? Why buttons? Why zips? There's so much, obviously there's so much innovation and excitement happening from a kind of material innovation perspective, but why these products? Both of you, really. I mean, maybe you start, Rob, because you're talking.
Sure. When we first started out, there was a lot of precedent with sustainable materials in textiles and fashion. So with Repreve and O'Connell, there was already a lot of brands that were utilizing those materials as their first step towards sustainability, using rPET, or in the case of O'Connell, recycled nylons. What I quickly realized was there was little to no focus on trims, meaning buttons, zipper pullers, eventually, zippers themselves. But it seemed like low-hanging fruit, and it was also a component that you could relatively bolt onto a garment that didn't require a lot of significant changes in SOP when it came to cut and sew manufacturing. A 4-hole button is a lot of ways a 4-hole button. So we focus on that really to sort of prove out our proof of concept, but also we found tremendous feedback from designers, certainly with some of our first customers like Outerknown, Kelly Slater's lifestyle apparel brand, where they were coming to us and saying, we've been waiting for someone to approach trims. These are small parts, these are little components, but what we found is that small things can have really big results, and that's kind of how we gravitated to the apparel industry from the get-go, and we're still present in that market today.
Really fascinating. What about you, Gert? Hangers?
Yeah, well, of course I grew up thinking that I wanted to be a hanger salesman at one point. That's how it all started. No, well, I explained how sort of that question popped up, right? Just working with clients, and I think the thing is, Rob, you just mentioned that sometimes it's really difficult to navigate solutions, and we thought there's really an opportunity to have a focus on sustainability, because that's really what our company evolves around, and create a couple of other values that are really important: design, longevity, which is also connected to sustainability as well, but really understanding retail, helping customers really create solutions for their hanger needs, and having conversations at the same level about how can we basically help you navigate that, because the status quo is a lot of large companies dominating this market, and there's not really a big focus on sustainability necessarily, and we see how with textile, with the fashion industry, how can I say, how pressing the matter is around textiles, and everything about that in your business, of course, and there's a lot of focus on that. Media, retailers, but also consumers are very savvy about that issue, but there's much more behind the scenes, obviously, and we help really our clients to get a solution for that problem.
What I think I remember you telling me a while back about the kind of scale of the hanger industry. It's pretty big, isn't it?
Yeah. So we just
and its impact.
I'm sorry.
And the impact when I mentioned that, really the scale.
Yeah, exactly. So that's interesting. There's not a lot of data out there, and we did find articles from like 20 years ago and cross-reference that with information on textiles, so how many garments are being produced, etc. So you try to sort of calculate through some vague data, which was tricky. So knowledge is a very important data, or a very important thing here. And we started, for instance, with a research, and we just finalized that, and we're going to publish our findings. We performed the research in the UK market to start with, and this is going to be a step in a longer process in navigating what that industry means. And we found that close to 1 billion hangers, plastic hangers, I should say, are being purchased in and for the UK only on an annual basis.
Billion?
1 billion, yes. So that's only the UK. And you can imagine what that means for the world. And we also went deeper, obviously, it was not just about the number of hangers, but also the composition of the hangers. How many hangers are being thrown away on an annual basis? Is there any recycling happening? What is the lifespan of a hanger? So we gathered a lot of information. It was an anonymous research. We actually hired a researcher for that. So we don't have access to the information of the retailers or brands that were interviewed, but we do have the raw data, and it's pretty frightening. And I wouldn't want to, that's the thing, we wouldn't want to extrapolate that to the United States, for instance, which is a massive retail market. And that's why we want to basically move into a couple of stages of research to get a better idea and ultimately a better grip on the situation.
And what about you, Rob? I don't imagine you've counted
how many buttons in the world.
Yeah.
Like with that.
I think we're in the triple comma club when it comes to buttons, certainly in the billions. And as you think about sort of the lifespan of garments and with fast fashion, it compounds really quickly. So I think despite there being a lot of shift in more sustainable materials to the textile and apparel industry, there's still a lot of room for growth. There's still a lot of brands that have yet to convert over to recycled content for their trims. So we see that market growing, but still at its essence right now, it's quite staggering in size. So we still have a long way to go.
What do you think? What's holding it back? What's holding the industry back from adopting or like seeking out more kind of recycled content in their trims? What are the challenges for them?
Well, you have to think about, in the cut and sew environment, you have your textile designers, then you have like your VPs of product, you have your supply chain partners, and honestly, the trims industry has been very established. Most designers are accustomed to requesting trim books. So from a supplier, imagine like giant booklets they're flipping through that have all the different trims, buttons, pullers. And it's a pretty, touch and feel driven industry. The feel of a mother of pearl button is very different from, let's just say, like a nylon button or a polyamide that may be lower cost. So, trims are an intimate way for the consumer to really sort of dive into a product. I mean, you think about zipper pullers on more higher end garments to lower end, they're going to be different, both on cost and certainly driven by material choice. So it really comes down to creating a shift in how designers sort of lay out their designs, but also often they're not used to being in the driver's seat in terms of actually dictating what they want. Often when we were first starting out, it was like, send me your trim book. And that's not how we were designed, since we work with lots of different trim manufacturers, and then we sort of pollinate their tooling with our materials. So when we approached the space, it was sort of just very different from how they were used to doing sort of their buying and laying out their bill of materials. So it really comes down now to, I think that's why one of the key reasons we were interested in our partnership with SupplyCompass is starting small and starting with designers that know this ahead of time, so that as, let's say, they're coming through the SupplyCompass platform, they can understand that they have sort of an empowerment to make those decisions and to kind of figure out how they want to build out those products so that they meet sustainability criteria, but also perform to the extent that is required of that brand and the quality that they're used to providing. So I guess long story short, it's going to be slow going, but we're constantly seeing more demand on the trim side, and I think that's just going to grow over time. But certainly always new ideas take time, and I think you have to be patient for that to sort of convert.
Definitely. And I definitely feel something that we feel at SupplyCompass is the need to kind of have all these solutions. This is why we really invest time in partnerships, is that if we've got all these different options on the table kind of at the start of the design process, when you are literally building your tech pack and it is there, rather than, maybe you've discovered something at a trade show. Well, trade shows can't happen in the same way that they used to now, firstly, but secondly, it needs, that may have been a long time ago, or it's in your phone saved in somewhere that's kind of not very helpful. So I think this idea of bringing it to front of mind, I think often we feel that the zips and buttons get kind of forgotten, or, oh, well, just whatever the factory has, but actually empowering brands to think, no, I can also make this change at this point. So getting on to, I think, the nitty gritty of kind of the raw materials that both your businesses are using. I think, Gert, if we just start with you in terms of, you obviously work with ocean plastics, but and I think I'll kind of go into more detail with you, Rob, on the ocean plastics industry.
For
But
sure.
Gert, perhaps you could just give a bit of an overview of the core materials of your hangers and why you've picked these materials.
Yeah. So roughly at this point, things are moving, but at this point we're working with FSC certified wood, so sustainably sourced wood. That's actually what we started with as a company, and we do plastic hangers as well. And there's this I would almost say misconception that we shouldn't work like a plasticless world. Well, we have a lot of plastic in this world, right? To say we should not do anything with that anymore. So either we put it in a landfill or we somehow wait until it dissolves into something would probably be a waste, because ultimately we need products. What is important is that you focus on plastics that can actually be repurposed, so fully recycled. And so we work with plastics that in our case, and I know Rob we're very close to the same type of solution in that regard. So we work with post-consumer waste, ocean-bound plastics, and marine plastics, and combine that basically and build different types of hangers from that. And ultimately, that's 100% recycled product. So it's no virgin material in there, no petroleum-based new plastics. It's all recycled. And the way we produce them, we also guarantee a longer lifespan. And then ultimately, after I mean, everything comes to an end at one point, it's possible to recycle that into a new product, whether that be a hanger or a different type of product. And that's roughly the two categories for hangers that we utilize today. The FSC, I don't know if everybody's fully familiar with that standard. It's Forest Stewardship Council, which is a guarantee. It's a chain of custody type certification that really guarantees that every step of the way there's a check and balance. The FSC, the organization does annual audits with all those steps in the process. So that's a guarantee for our clients ultimately that they have hangers that are actually sustainably sourced.
Amazing. I mean, the whole recycled ocean plastics world is, I imagine, to most people listening to this webinar, why many people may be here today, it seems quite an opaque industry as an outsider. I think I've got quite a few questions on ocean plastics, but firstly, like, how did you start, Rob? Because I know you've gone quite deep into the supply chains. I mean, firstly, how deep are you going? And secondly, like, how did you get into, behind the scenes and further up the chain? Were you literally kind of there in the port, going out and visiting the main areas? How did that all happen?
Yeah, literally, pre-COVID, my life consisted of a lot of long distance and long haul travel. So part of sort of building out the supply chain was really about seeing it in first person. So that brought me to all corners of the world, really trying to figure out, like, what is really going on here, and what sort of cause and effect relationship is taking place. That's not only driving plastics into the ocean, but also what's creating the demand for it in the first place. And you start looking at different economies and where GDP is growing, you're often going to find waste. And in some parts of the world, you're going to discover mismanaged waste. And there's a lot of academic research that substantiates this, but essentially, when you look at the macro, plastics are ubiquitous. Especially single-use plastics have become a powerful tool for corporate interest to grow sales, but also in a lot of ways, it's had tremendous impact on the livelihood of a lot of communities with, food that does not perish quickly and other safety measures. But there's also a price to pay for that when there is no waste management systems to take on that waste. So it's a compounding effect. And as we kind of looked at how this was unfolding, it was clear that, there was a large network of global processors, meaning, converters who take the raw material and convert it back to pellet or flake or yarn, that were really siloed, and no one was sort of connecting the dots there. So, rather than reinvent the wheel, we looked at the actual problem, we figured out a solution would be to sort of empower those processors in those local markets to have offtake for this material, and in effect, drive a demand for material that's going to create opportunities on the ground, but also satisfy the needs and demands of large corporates that are really starting to seek out ocean-bound plastics and other recycled content. So it really was, a firsthand start. And then we're at the point now where many processors are coming to us in order to validate their supply chain and onboard onto the platform.
I feel like, obviously this has definitely been made more challenging in COVID, but getting out there and seeing things firsthand, what's really going on, is really the only way that you can understand how to change, improve, also make those direct relationships. So what are the different types? In my mind, ocean plastics is all born equal. Is that not the case? Are there different qualities?
As we looked at it, it's always easy to just encapsulate, an issue into one sort of definition. But when you kind of pull back the layers, you start realizing that there's a lot of nuances to it. It's not relatively straightforward. In 2015, Dr. Jenna Jambeck released a study, an academic study, really focusing on ocean-bound plastics and this concept, which was validated, mismanaged waste within 50 kilometers of the coastline. In areas where there's no waste management services, it's often prone, if not destined, to reach the lowest point, which is sea level. And that's being contributed to whether it's estuaries, canals, river systems, and just sort of general, topography. So when you started looking at ocean bound, then you started realizing, well, there's a lot of different form factors. There's some material that's, exiting a river or waterway delta and then washing back ashore, which we consider coastal. There's also waterway material. Ocean Cleanup is doing a great job in trying to effectively, collect those materials in rivers and waterways. And I'm sure some have heard there's about 10 major rivers in the world that are large contributors as major highways into the oceans that are, comprised of a lot of waste, both organic and plastic. So, you look at waterway and then obviously ocean bound. And then, there's also high seas material, which we all know is in the gyres. But the real issue here is accessibility. How do you get your hands on material, not only that you can collect, but you can still manufacture with? And that's why ocean bound has become a really hot topic, because it's material that is accessible on land, but it has a different story than, let's say, a true ocean plastic, which is being recovered from the ocean, like a fishing net or ghost gear or recovered, fishing supplies. So as you start really looking at the issue, you start really realizing that there's a lot of different inputs. And in doing so, there's a lot of different outputs. So when we kind of looked at how we would map out these materials, we came up with those 5 categories to really just help drive awareness that, not all ocean plastic is created equal, let alone plastic itself. So that's kind of how we started looking at it from the get-go. And that general theory has held true as we, communicate that with our customers and our clients.
So interesting. I can see a couple of questions popping up. I'm just going to ask one more, and then I will ask a few here. Gert, how important is communicating the story of your products in kind of selling it into brands? Because obviously what Rob's just described there is communicating that to an end consumer could be really powerful. Is that something that you both see as really valuable as well as a storytelling element?
Yeah, well, part of it is just education, right? It starts with knowledge. I mentioned that before, and I think a lot of people and corporations, people within corporations, don't have access to all the information. And I know that Rob, with his company, has done a tremendous, deep dive into how this industry works and how the raw material supply in that industry works. And the same applies to us, and it takes time. It takes time, and it takes contacts, it takes collaboration. Building your supply chain is not something you do overnight, especially not when it concerns materials that are relatively unknown or maybe relatively less processed. It's easy to produce something virgin if that's what has been done for decades, right? So we make sure to cover our bases there and really try to educate the general public, but especially our customers around the solutions there. I think an interesting one here is when speaking to customers, we oftentimes will get the remark, "Oh, no, we already recycle our hangers." So okay, so what do you do? You know, and where do these hangers come from? What is the material they're made of? And then you start finding out that they're made of polystyrene, which in itself, I mean, you can recycle polystyrene, but to reach the same structural integrity of a hanger after recycling the polystyrene, you need to add virgin material. So okay, maybe you're recycling, but you're again putting virgin material into the mix. So we really see it as a responsibility. I mean, we're a commercial company. We want to sell hangers. Don't get me wrong, but at the same time, we'd rather sell one hanger that lasts for a couple of years than 3 hangers that last a year, which is truly the reality with a lot of retailers.
Yeah.
Our obligation is to clarify how it works and what that solutions are actually available to them if they are willing to make a change.
Yeah. I mean, Fiona's in the chats just asked a great question, which is, she's saying it's interesting to hear the attitude towards trim designing is actually can be quite a limited one, with a focus really on kind of making margin and fast turnaround. So, I mean, this is really to both of you. What advice do you have to changing this attitude towards the industry to get them considering and kind of designing better from a trim and accessories perspective?
That's a great question.
If you had the answer, then I'm sure.
I'm not in the trim business, of course, but in terms of hangers, again, it's about having the conversation and also creating a sense of responsibility to do a deep dive in how do our processes run at the moment. And I'm talking on the client side, so on the retailer side or the brand side. And sometimes it's really, checking your supply chain and companies are doing this on the textile and I think more navigate where do our products come from. So I think, we really try to sort of clarify.
Is that my internet that's gone a bit funny, or is that Rob? Is it fine? It's just I disconnected.
It sounds fine now.
Perfect. Okay, good. I just was checking. It's not my internet, but it probably is. Carry on. Sorry, Gat.
No, to us, it's being a partner for our customers and help them navigate basically the situation. And there's also a moment of truth, right? I think a lot of retailers and brands, maybe they want to, but, and this is also the research that we did, it proves that the dollar amount or the pound or the pence, in terms of hangers, it's generally not pounds, but more pence. Pences. There's definitely a hesitation because of the economics, and that's also a change of mindset. You can handle these things in a different way and maybe even save money in the long run.
Yeah, I mean, the change of mindset one. I mean, if any of us had a golden wand to kind of change mindset and attitude overnight, then we would be waving it hard right now. I think really it's making sure if you're working large or small organization, making sure that those conversations, in my opinion, are not just happening with a sustainability team or a small silo in an organization. It needs to come top down, bottom up. Everyone needs to be talking about it at every single step in a product's life cycle. You could, what would be an alternative to this? Okay, well, maybe we're going to do a trade-off on this, but actually at least we've had that conversation. And so every step of the way, rather than thinking, we want to do perfection, so let's wait until next year and do perfection, because perfection doesn't exist. So I think that actually training in an organization, the team to be having, changing the attitude by having these conversations regularly. I don't know what you
nail it on the head. You will get that. We're looking for a biodegradable solution. There's no true biodegradable without any, without any waste. Ultimately, it is actually not there. And I mean, there's a lot of development, not just in the retail industry. We're really looking outside of this industry as well. Obviously, research and development is tremendously important. But you have to make it, we have to, it's a constant machine that is happening today. So let's just make a change, and we can change again in a couple of years to maybe a solution that is even better than that. But yeah, just waiting for, that the right solution to arrive is just, a waste.
Also, if you look at where investment comes from, if you see, I always feel this is that if you think you're waiting for perfection until perfection arrives, it may not ever get there, because ultimately investment goes into areas where they see demand growing. And if loads of people are putting a lot of interest in an area, then there will be money in it that then the next innovation, so it will progress faster. Anyway, sorry, I'm
into add one thing to that.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to mention any names, but I've had a couple of conversations with big retailers in Europe and in the States, and they purchase tens of millions, let me just keep it vague, but literally tens of millions of hangers on an annual basis, and it's thrown out every year. There's no joke. It's happening every year. So for these companies to wait for the perfect solution to arrive, I'm like, make a change now and just keep your eyes open and let's work together. And again, that's why we have these conversations as well. Let's learn from each other and try to find better ways and keep on evolving.
I mean, Rob, is there an opportunity for, recycled ocean plastics? Can it be cheaper than their virgin alternative? Is that possible? Or actually is the process of processing recycled content into new, is it going to cost a little bit more, but that's actually just what we've all got to absorb, and that's the future?
It's a market, so on some of our materials, we do have price parity, with virgin materials. It's largely determined by, geography, capacity, and efficiency of processors, to convert that raw waste into a refined finished good, whether it's a pellet, a flake, or a yarn. So I think over time that is going to become, it'll become far more accessible, for brands and manufacturers to attain materials that are not going to put a huge dent in their bottom line. But we're also large proponents of blending, which is a great way to sort of bridge that gap, whether you're introducing ocean plastics as almost like a concentrate into the product and then balancing out the rest of that material with, say, like a post-consumer recycled stream. So you can get cost to where it needs to be, as I think Gert nailed it on the head. Like, in order for large brands and manufacturers and retailers to really take this on, there has to be a stairway. It can't be a giant leap across this chasm, because we're all in the risk business when it comes to sustainability, and how can you help make those decisions easier and less full of friction. So I think that's really part of what, SupplyCompass, Arch and Hook, and Oceanworks are all doing on our own, is really trying to figure out how can we de-risk this opportunity so that brands, retailers, manufacturers have access to these materials and can do so in confidence and still operate a business, at a profit. This is the world we live in right now that we have to be sensible to.
Totally. And I think, something that we often discuss internally is that, obviously everyone's so fixed on the unit cost, and actually looking at the wider cost of a product, looking at where in your organization you can actually drive huge efficiencies, and things like marketplaces that you've got. There's ways to strip out cost elsewhere in your business so that you can pay a bit more on your unit cost. And so it's about kind of looking holistically as well, like that. What, to both of you, like what role, like how can and why should fashion play a role in cleaning up oceans and cleaning up waste?
Fashion's real, right? Like, we all have a wardrobe, and clothing and apparel is a deep part of all of our lives, whether it's high fashion or fast fashion. And it's a tangible reality that, the textile industry is massive. At the same time, it also has a lot of responsibility to take on. There's lots of issues surrounding textiles, and even just from colorants and dyes, and certainly organic cottons, and the list goes on and on. But it's at the forefront of our culture. And I've always felt fashion is powerful because everyone gets a chance to make their own personal statement with what they wear, and sort of how they choose to to portray themselves and what they feel passionate about, whether you're wearing Patagonia or Gucci. I think sustainability can be woven into all of those brands and still have a lasting effect. So I see fashion really as a cultural connection that hopefully, to Gert's point earlier, it drives education. So the more we can see the apparel industry dive into sustainable solutions, I think the more we're going to see consumers start reacting and saying, wait a second, like, I didn't know about this, or I always thought these hangers were recycled and now they're not, or whatnot. So I think we're at a really exciting time to kind of kick this into the next gear.
I like that excitement. I mean, before we get on, there's a few more questions that I think there's some in the chat as well. I do like to talk a bit about some challenges, because I think if we talk about challenges, then we can also discuss how to overcome them. So, I mean, you've both touched a little bit on the kind of old ways of working in these kind of fixed, quite old industries in some senses. We've talked about this before, Gert, the kind of, for instance, that the hanger industry, the status quo, the constant flow of plastic hangers through, how it works for everyone and no one's changing it because it just works like that. So how that's a challenge. How are you getting around that?
Yeah, it's a big challenge. It's a great win for some of the large hanger companies because they have a great system running, right? It is exactly what I mentioned before. If you can sell a hanger every year again, over and over, that is a great system from an economic standpoint, and not so much from a sustainable standpoint. We feel also the responsibility as a supplier, as a hanger brand, to come up with solutions that in the long run can actually save money. So let's not focus on just the efficiency of purchasing that hanger, shipping that off to the garment manufacturer, then have the garment ship on the hanger to the destination market, either sell it on the hanger or even change it onto another hanger, right? A store hanger, that's what happens as well. And then this hanger goes away. So how can we repurpose that hanger? And how can we come up with a hanger that's actually not as brittle that it does break, because that's what happens now. So we feel the responsibility that we have to come up with solutions there where we can still have an economical hanger, but that lasts longer and then actually is from a recycled source and can be recycled. And now let's look at the system, so the whole process, the logistics around these hangers, and how can we change that into really a more sustainable system. That is definitely something that we emphasize, and that's the type of conversations that we are having now. And I'm telling you, they're waking up. They're absolutely waking up. They're really interested. They really want to work together, and that's. In essence, it's ultimately you're working with three big players, which is the hanger manufacturers, it's the factory garment manufacturers, and it's the retailers and the brands, I should say. Actually, four big players. We really want to work with the brands and the retailers to collaboratively to come up with a new solution, because it doesn't work if the retailers say, no, the hangers are only the brands only supply on these type of hangers, or the brands say, no, we cannot change because those retailers don't accept any other hangers. We have to think about it, a little differently. It's happening as we speak, but it's a big machine, so it doesn't go overnight.
So what advice for people who are working for either big or large brands or retailers listening?
Call us and let's sit around the table. Yeah, let's talk about it. I mean, we are now we're dealing with a couple of really massive retailers, both in North America and in Europe, and actually they're global retailers, and we're also a global company. And we are really working together with them in trying to develop a new type of hanger to do just that, live longer, and also speak about how the processes work and how we can indeed repurpose these hangers within their systems. So that's an ongoing conversation, but we as a supplier of hangers cannot resolve that by ourselves. It's something that the retailers and brands will have to do, and we can only facilitate.
And I mean, Rob, I imagine there are different but similar challenges within your supply chains that you set up. Are there lots of it's something that we've definitely experienced at SupplyCompass, is there's a lot of well, this is who we've always worked with, and we're not that open to making new relationships. And you kind of have to be like, well, if we need to set up these new supply chains, there needs to be some new relationships made. What kind of challenges have you faced in that?
Yeah, when we started facing that like early on, we quickly realized that like no one really wants to dismantle their existing supply chain and rebuild a new one. It just takes a lot of time and effort from internal teams, especially when these supply chains are running at an incredible efficiency. So one way we kind of overcame that challenge is by not requiring our brand partners and manufacturers to reinvent the wheel. So what that means is, when brands work with us, they can utilize their existing supply chains. That's exactly how our trims business works. If you have a trims manufacturer and you have tooling that is there, we can pollinate that machinery and that tooling with our materials, so that you as a brand do not have to go and decouple from an existing relationship, which I'm sure you've spent, lots of time and energy building, and perhaps, multiple factory visits over the years and such. And the whole idea is we can come in and be really a value add partner that can bring materials at scale and at quality, and really help drive those sustainable, decisions forward. So that's just like one way we kind of looked at how we can be really complementary, to the existing supply chain, rather than dismantling it and sort of causing friction where it isn't required. So we're definitely sensitive to that.
Interesting. And what I think this is something that I think we've all of us have discussed before, but the transactional relationships moving towards long-term partnerships, how if a brand needs to use, is it always feasible to build a long-term partnership with the supply chain, or is it actually a duty of a brand or a retailer to invest in that? What are your thoughts on the kind of transactional, the kind of transition away from that?
And you mean in terms of like how brands may want to just start over? Is that kind of the question?
Well, I think I'm probably referring to more the kind of, when I talk about transactional, the more like not investing in the relationship with that supply chain. And like you have invested so much time and energy in building your supply chains and also setting up, exactly what you've done in your marketplace. Is that, is it important? Is long-term relationships important, or actually are you setting businesses up to be able to actually through your marketplace be quite transactional, but then you've got the relationships? Or how does that work?
Yeah, we can be fairly autonomous. We do have some customers that come through and really want to purchase materials, and they have their supply chain down pat. Like they don't necessarily need a lot more assistance from us other than I need material. And as I alluded to earlier, like putting the buy now button next to recycled plastics. There's plenty of customers out there that can just kind of run with that. And that's nice because that's their choice. And we like to be able to facilitate that. On the contrary, we do have other, brand partners that really want more of a full service experience and have a lot more questions or a lot more trepidations about introducing these materials into their supply chains. And that's where we do a little bit more hand holding and have a number of more assets and services that we can provide. But, the beauty of what we're building is that there is choice and there is redundancy on materials. So whether you're a brand and you want to simply be transactional with materials and off you go, you can do that. If you want to really lean more on some of our other services, we can provide that as well. So, and that wasn't always the case from the beginning. I think early on it was fairly hands-on. But what we found is, to a lot of accolades to the industry, some brands are starting to be able to run with the ball on their own. And we really champion that because I think that's how you scale this industry faster. And I think that's how you effectively create more offtake and more impact.
Really interesting. What about for you guys?
Something to that. So I think it's twofold. So one thing, but of course I view this from our perspective. One thing is there's a tremendous opportunity for retail regarding hangers to control the end of life. So this is not consumer waste, right? This doesn't go into the waste bins of families and has then to be sorted out and collected. We can totally organize that and make sure that white stays with, just simplified here, but white stays with white and red stays with red, if you start recycling, because that's even a step in recycling where we're sorting out colors. Oversimplifying this now, but there's really an opportunity to coordinate that. And I think to work in a transactional way will never really allow you to bring, and that's the second point, an efficiency if you want to organize that in a proper way. So I really, from a production standpoint, there's a potential for efficiency, obviously, if you have a long-term relationship, but also for the end of life. So again, it's systems thinking. It's not thinking in, let's just place an order and we throw that into our stores. It's more thinking long-term. What is this this going to do for my organization in 5 years from now? There's an opportunity. And again, both from a sustainable standpoint, but also from an economic standpoint.
It's really interesting what you're saying there about kind of thinking, investing in where your company might be 5 years down the line, which is obviously something that a founder or a senior team can do. But if people, how do you get people who are maybe moving around organization every couple of years to care about that 5 years future? I mean, obviously, this is a big question to be asking, but.
Yeah, I have an interesting one here. We've decided, we cannot do this on all programs, but on certain programs, we give extended warranties. So that really, well, obviously shows that we believe in the product, but it also gives dependability on that product from our customers. So they know they can depend on this product for a longer period of time. That's really sort of, amplifying that loyalty to a certain product, I guess, in the long run.
The key message is we need to all be thinking long-term, regardless of whether we are in that company working in that supply chain in 5 years' time. We all have a duty to not just think about this season. And I think there's a question or and a statement from Bettina in the channel that saying, really so much money is going into marketing. Why is there not more investment going to product development, shifting from marketing because the quality of everything is going down, etc. So I think this idea that if we were thinking more long term, if that was the standard, thinking beyond just this season. Mm-hmm. So we've got 10 minutes left. I've got one question for you, Rob, on platforms and the role of that digital can play in this future of the fashion industry, and then. Please fire through some more questions, anyone and everyone. So, obviously you've got your platform at the heart of what you're doing, your marketplace. Why did you decide to build that? Why not just do it offline? What was the kind of impetus for that, really?
It was really all trial and effect. So we started out really as a consultancy when Oceanworks was sort of in its early days. And in doing so, we had a lot of deal flow. We talked to hundreds and hundreds of companies, trying to help them navigate, using basically, pen and paper to piece together supply chains for them. And in doing so, we learned that there was a lot of pattern recognition in terms of, well, I really need to be able to just sample material. I can't order 20 metric tons from the get-go. That's not, financially feasible, let alone practical. And a number of other sort of nuances that really led us to really validate that, we knew we wanted to build a digital marketplace, but we wanted to get that feedback from our potential customer base as to what they would want, how they would want to engage with it. And that's ultimately how we led to launching the digital platform. It's really about creating choice and accessibility. We were very early to invest in SEO and making sure that when designers or product developers or brands manufacturers are sort of seeking ocean plastic supply and recycled plastic materials, Oceanworks was there to really be a stepping stone to provide resources, case studies, a lot of different relative, content to kind of help figure out how they were going to, move forward. So, using technology is really powerful. We look at a lot of other different markets that have used technology to effectively massively change how we engage with lodging, whether it's Airbnb or certainly e-commerce with Amazon, transportation, with Uber and lots of other, companies that are, solving those spaces. When you looked at plastics, there really wasn't a large focus on tying this all together into a globally accessible, platform. So in doing so, what we found is, not only putting the buy now button next to materials, we've also given a voice to a tremendous amount of suppliers and processors that now have access to those interested buyers. So we found it as something that had to happen in order to effectively sort of be a catalyst to drive this awareness. Because if you don't know if a material is available, whether it's a hanger or trims or buttons or other sustainable solutions, then it's not something you can actually validate and move forward with. So creating that accessibility for us was paramount.
And the fact that, I mean, you've got a buy now button, I think this is what's so important, is that this needs to happen in the supply chain. The same immediacy that, you can buy an item and you're checked out within 30 seconds on an e-com site, and bringing some of that into all that's going on behind the scenes, I think really, really, I mean, it is the future. So there's some questions in Q&A. I've been I'm asking the questions from chats. I've just missed the Q&A one. So question says, what will happen to the trim made out of plastic when the piece of clothing is no longer usable and thrown out?
I think a great example of that is, Patagonia and their Worn Wear program. And you're starting to see other brands, rolling this out as well, whether it's a take back or essentially, refurbing, these products. And a lot of the, apparel brands are starting to think about end of life, as Gert mentioned, whether it's a hanger or the garment itself. We don't participate in that end of life tremendously because we're not involved in sort of that retail environment. But what I can say is that, since these trims are being composed of single polymers, so, they're not a blend of two different polymers, the recyclability of them is there. How that market expands and how garments alone are recycled is a murky area that I think, there's going to be another very big company, I'm sure, that steps into that space to really address, what do you do with all this fast fashion garments, and is all of it turning into rags, or is there ways to sort of reclaim those sustainable materials for sort of a perpetual or certainly a circular economy, environment. So I think right now that's sort of the arena, but we're very curious to see where it goes.
Really interesting. Gert, is recycling your recycled hangers, is that something that you are able to do yet? Is that on the horizon?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we have the whole supply chain basically ready to do that. So we can absolutely recycle our hangers and either make hangers out of them or something else.
So how many times can you recycle the recycled hanger into, is it an inferior material after it's recycled, or is it ability, are you able to do it as good as new?
I mean, that's a good question. So, I mean, like a statement, it's 100% recyclable, right? That's one of those. And in theory, yes, but there's obviously the impact of dirt, of it being touched, you name it, and there's the process of heating and in the injection molding process. So there is some. Let's put it this way: it's not as strong as virgin material in essence, I would say, but completely functional. So I wouldn't want to put a factor to it, but definitely, at least the plastic that we use doesn't need any virgin material if we recycle it. But then again, we also mix it again with other upcycled plastic, from waste streams. So
durability and longevity is actually really, really key, because it's extending the need to recycle, because ultimately things have become inferior after a number of times. Quick question. Do you, from an anonymous attendee, do you sell hangers to manufacturers too?
Oh yeah. But that's actually a good one. Yes, we do. Whomever wants a hanger will be their friend. I'm just kidding. But manufacturers, it's interesting because I mentioned earlier in the conversation that we didn't want to see the hanger as just a commodity, when probably for the garment manufacturers, because that's what we're talking about, they require a certain level of let's say technology or architecture that will allow to transport that hanger to another point. That's technically usually the function of the hanger. But I do want to emphasize, because we have a big focus in this conversation, obviously, on plastic, which is really important. But whether it's plastic, but also especially with FSC, we really have that opportunity to create hangers that fit within that retail environment. So for us, the design element is a super important one. I just wanted to emphasize that because I realized we didn't really speak about that, or I didn't speak about it at least. But yeah, depending on how a hanger is being used, we make that translation and yeah, applied design, so to speak.
I mean, they're beautiful, beautiful hangers. Go on to both sites, and actually both your sites are great as well. So check them out. I think before, we've got 2 minutes left. Rob, in terms of for brands listening today who were interested, obviously they can reach out to you directly, but some key takeaways, like what, you know, are there some kind of myths about, is it, when we first started speaking, I thought, you know, we'd have to make 1 million buttons in order to start working together. How easy is it to start working with you?
You know, with us and our initial trims, it's really straightforward. We offer a pretty low MOQ, so 30,000 units for buttons. And that's really, that was heavily leaned upon our really strong relationship with one of our initial trim suppliers that we started working with. And they see the investment in this space, and that's really why they're willing to be flexible, so that, you know, you can get deal flow and get product in market so that you can finally gain some traction. You know, but if our trim manufacturer is really not of interest, you know, some of the brands, you know, tuning in today, your manufacturer is also very powerful, you know, in terms of your relationship and dictating what materials you'd like to nominate to be used in your existing tooling, or perhaps their existing line of tooling to manufacture some of these pullers and buttons and other items, as well as our relationship with YKK. You know, so we're you know, willing, ready, and open, you know, to serve your needs, and, you know, certainly come to Oceanworks, you know, with a small or large idea, and we're happy to facilitate, you know, the conversation to see where it takes us.
Awesome. And for you, Gert, businesses wanting to work for you. So I'm aware that you're working kind of at the moment really focused on working with where you can have maximum impact, big retailers. Yeah, what are some key takeouts?
Well, in terms of volumes, you mentioned that, Rob. We have lines, we have menu options, and we have fully custom programs. So we really have, I would say, solutions for a variety of customers. But another thing is just to focus on materials. So we are opening other opportunities outside of hangers with that focus on material, trying to make other elements in the store environment more sustainable, and that's just by having conversations with our customers, you know, trying to understand what they're looking for, what their challenges are, and help them out.
Amazing. We are literally bang on time. This is amazing. Sorry if there's more questions that come through. Please do send them through afterwards, and I will send through, for those who signed up through SupplyCompass, and I think this comes through also anywhere else you've signed up, you can get a recording to this webinar if you want to share with anyone in your team. Just email info@supplycompass.com if you have any issues with that. And we will have an upcoming webinar soon. We haven't got one in the diary yet, but we've got something before Christmas, hopefully. Thank you so much, Rob and Gert. That was a pleasure to talk. I feel like we could talk about ocean plastics and trims and hangers for a long time. But thank you for taking the time, and take care.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much. Thank you, SupplyCompass.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.